Hey, welcome to the briefing. What I'm going to cover with you today is this. The pickup promise failed before the customer walked in. That title matters because the failure I want to talk about today does not begin where most people notice it. Most people notice it when the customer walks in, when the associate starts looking uncomfortable, when the pickup order is not ready, and when somebody says the system said we had it. By then, the failure is already active. The trap formed earlier when the digital promise moved faster than the store's physical confirmation. The website said the item was available. The system accepted the order. The pickup window opened. The store received the task, and the team kept moving as if the system count was the same thing as operational truth. That is the retail pressure I want to slow down today, because this is not just about the service of buy online, pick up in store. You'll hear me summarize as BOPUS. It is not just about one online pickup order, one missing item, or one frustrated customer. It is a leadership pattern, and it is what happens when a leader can see a trap forming, but the operation stays on the same route because nothing has broken yet. That is where strategic evasion becomes useful. And I want to be careful with that phrase because evasion can sound weak if you hear it the wrong way. Strategic evasion is not avoiding responsibility. It is not hiding from the customer. It is not dodging the work. It is when a leader has enough of a forward read to see a predictable trap forming and then changes the route before that trap owns the operation. The objective stays the same. The route changes. That is the discipline. In this case, the objective is simple. Protect the customer promise. When a customer buys online and chooses pickup, they are not just placing an order. They are making a plan around the store's promise. They may be driving across town, coming on a lunch break, picking something up before work, or trying to solve a household problem before the day moves on. From inside the store, it can look like one task in the pickup queue. From the customer side, it is a promise. That difference matters because the store does not get judged by the internal reason the promise failed. The customer does not care if the item was misplaced, if the count was wrong after a promotion, if the last unit was damaged, or if the product was returned but not processed. The customer sees the promise, and then the customer sees whether the promise held. Now, the hard part for retail leaders is that the system often looks cleaner than the floor. The system says 2 on hand, the order management screen accepts the order, the pickup window opens, the task appears. The process says go pick the item. At first, that feels safe. It feels reasonable. It feels like the normal route. That is why this trap works. It does not look like a trap at first. It looks like normal execution. A lot of operational failures hide inside normal execution. The process looks familiar. The screen looks official. The count looks valid. The task looks routine. The team moves. Nobody feels the need to pause because nothing is visibly broken yet. That is the exact condition where leaders have to learn how to read forward. Let me put you in the store. It is Monday morning after a strong weekend promotion. The store had heavy traffic all weekend. Customers were moving through a promotional section near the front of the store. The featured item was advertised online, tied to a limited time offer, and handled all weekend by customers, associates, and return traffic. By Monday morning, the system shows 2 units on hand, and then a customer places a BOPUS order for one of them. The pickup window is 2 hours away. The order drops into the queue. At first glance, nothing looks wrong. The system accepted the order. The item shows available. The pickup time is still workable. The associate has time. The store has handled this kind of order before, so the normal route says keep moving. But the manager has enough experience to know there is risk in this order. The item was part of a promotion. The section was busy all weekend. Returns came in that morning. The on-hand count is low. The item may be in the wrong place. It may have been damaged. It may have been stolen. It may be sitting in another customer's cart. It may exist in the system, but not in any location the associate can actually find. That is the forward read. And that forward read does not require a full investigation. It does not require panic. It does not require shutting down the whole pickup process. It simply requires the leader to say, this order has enough risk attached to it that the normal route may not protect the promise. That is the strategic evasion moment. Not after the customer arrives. Not after the associate checks 3 places. Not after the ready notification goes out. Not after the customer is standing at the counter. Before that, before the promise breaks in public. Because once the customer arrives, the store is no longer preventing the failure. It is explaining the failure. That is a different kind of work, and it is more expensive. It costs time. It costs trust. It pulls the manager away from the floor. It ties up the counter. It puts pressure on the associate. It creates recovery work that did not need to exist. Most important, it teaches the customer something the store does not want to teach. It teaches the customer that online availability may not mean anything. That is a dangerous lesson. A store can recover one customer, but repeated pickup failures train customers not to trust the pickup path. Once trust starts breaking, you are not just solving one order anymore. You are repairing confidence, and confidence is harder to rebuild after the promise has already failed. Here's the common misread. The customer arrives, the item cannot be found, and the first visible issue becomes the associate. The associate did not find it. The associate took too long. The associate should have checked the back. The associate should have asked sooner. The associate should have known. That sounds reasonable in the moment because the associate is the person touching the failure at the end, but the person closest to the failure is not always the person who created the failure. That is a core leadership lesson. The associate may be where the failure appeared, but the failure may have been generated earlier. It may have been generated by weak inventory accuracy, promotion movement, returns that were not processed clearly, shrink, or an order system that accepted a promise before physical reality had been confirmed. So when the manager only sees the associate, the manager may correct the visible person instead of reading the trap that produced the moment. That is weak aim. Under pressure, weak aim can still look like action. The manager may move quickly, step in, recover the customer, push the associate to search faster, and tell the team to communicate better next time. It may feel decisive, but if the read is wrong, the action is pointed at the wrong part of the problem. That is why CSA has to come before deepen. CSA is the read. It helps the leader ask, what is actually happening here? Not just what is loud, not just what is visible, not just what the customer is reacting to, not just what the screen says, what is actually happening. In this scenario, CSA helps the manager see the field before choosing the move. A 360-degree overview widens the read. The manager sees more than a pickup task. There is a customer promise, a system count, a physical floor, a recent promotion, a return flow, associate capacity, pickup timing, and store credibility, all touching the same issue. Focused assessment helps the manager avoid chasing the wrong point of effort. The issue is not automatically associate effort. The central issue may be unverified, low-count inventory attached to an active customer promise. Three-dimensional consideration helps the manager see what the decision changes. If the store waits, the cost does not stay inside the system. It shifts to the customer, the counter, the associate, the manager, and the trust attached to the pickup process. Close-up analysis helps the manager understand the mechanism. Is the failure coming from the count, the physical location, the return process, damaged product, shrink, stockroom process, or the order flow itself? Long-range observation helps the manager project what repeated pickup failures create over time. One failed promise is a customer service issue. Repeated failed promises become a trust pattern. Dynamic assessment helps the manager keep updating the read as new information arrives. The associate checks the shelf. The item is not there. Returns are checked. Still not there. The pickup window is closing. The customer may be arriving soon. The read changes, and the next move has to change with it. That is the connection. CSA gives the leader a cleaner read. Deepen takes that cleaner read and helps the leader move through the problem with better structure. Strategic evasion is a deepen move. It fits when the trap is visible before the problem becomes active. In this case, the trap is not the customer, the pickup order, or the associate. The trap is the collision between a digital promise and physical uncertainty. The system is saying available. The floor is saying maybe. The leader has to decide whether to let that gap keep moving toward the customer. That is the real decision. Not, do we fulfill pickup orders? Of course we do. Not, do we trust the system? The system is useful. But useful is not the same as complete. The better question is, when does the system signal need physical confirmation before the promise continues? That is a better leadership read. The problem is not that systems are bad. The problem is that leaders can treat system confidence as if it removes the need for operational judgment. It does not. The system gives you a signal. The floor gives you another signal. The customer promise gives you another signal. The clock gives you another signal. The leader's job is to read those signals together before the operation walks into avoidable exposure. I have learned to respect that gap over time, not because the screen is useless and not because the floor is always right. The gap matters because both can be true in different ways. The system can be right according to the last transaction record, and the store can still be wrong in the moment because the item is damaged, misplaced, unprocessed, or already in motion somewhere else. That is the kind of operating reality that does not always show up cleanly on a dashboard. A leader has to read the screen and the floor together. This is also where customer-facing work becomes unforgiving. Inside the operation, people understand that inventory moves. They understand that counts lag. They understand that returns and promotions create noise. The customer does not live inside that context. The customer lives inside the promise. They clicked buy, they selected pickup, they received a time window. They arranged their movement around the store's answer. That is why the promise deserves protection before the customer becomes part of the failure. That is strategic evasion. You are not avoiding the order. You are avoiding the unnecessary collision. You are protecting the promise before it breaks. And this is where the tool has to be understood correctly. Strategic evasion is not about refusing hard work. It is about refusing to spend the rest of the shift fighting a problem that a cleaner route could have prevented. Now think about what happens when the leader does not make that move. The order sits in the pickup queue. The associate goes to the shelf. The item is not there. The associate checks the back. Still not there. Someone checks returns. Someone checks the wrong location. Someone asks another associate. The clock keeps moving. The customer may already be driving. The ready notification may have been sent too early, or the customer may arrive before the team has a clean answer. Now the customer is at the counter. Now the associate is explaining. Now the manager is getting pulled in. And now the store is trying to find a substitute under pressure. Now the issue has moved from internal uncertainty to customer-facing failure. Once it becomes customer-facing, the cost changes. The customer no longer hears a prevention move, they hear an explanation. And explanations after the promise, breaks rarely sound as strong as leaders think they do. We thought we had it. The system said it was here. We are checking the back. It may have sold. We can look for another option. Those may all be honest statements, but to the customer, they often sound like the store made a promise it did not control. That is trust damage. Trust damage does not always show up immediately in the metric. It may show up later. The customer does not use pickup next time. The customer chooses delivery from someone else. The customer calls before ordering because they no longer believe the online signal. The customer leaves a review. The customer tells someone else the store's online availability is unreliable. That is how a small operational gap becomes a reputation issue. And I want to make a point here. This is not about perfection. No retail operation is perfect. Counts will be wrong. Returns will create confusion. Customers will move product. Shrink happens. Promotions create noise. Back rooms get messy. Systems lag. People make mistakes. The point is not perfection. The point is root discipline when the risk is visible. If the leader can see the trap forming and still chooses to keep the normal route untouched, the operation may be walking into a preventable failure. That is the discipline this tool is trying to build. A trap avoided early is not a problem solved later. It is simply a problem that never gets to own the operation. There's another reason this matters. Late recovery usually looks more expensive than early root control, but leaders often value it more because it is visible. Everyone can see the manager step in at the counter. Everyone can hear the apology. Everyone can watch the substitute offer. But fewer people notice the manager who quietly prevents that moment by catching the risk earlier. That quiet prevention is easy to undervalue, even though it is often the cleaner leadership move. The discipline is not to turn every small signal into a major event. That would slow the store down and create friction of its own. The discipline is to recognize the combination of signals that makes the order different. Low count by itself may not be enough. A recent promotion by itself may not be enough. A return flow by itself may not be enough. But when those signals attach to a customer promise with a moving pickup window, the leader has a different condition. The route may need to change. That matters because a lot of leaders only value the recovery. They remember the customer they saved, the associate they coached, the escalation they handled, and the moment they stepped in. But the better move may have been earlier and quieter. The better move may have been to verify the questionable item before the ready message, flag low-count promotional items before they entered the pickup promise, contact the customer early while options still existed, or assign ownership to the high-risk order before it drifted through the normal queue. None of that looks dramatic, but it protects control. Disciplined leadership is not always loud. It is often controlled, accurate, and timed correctly. It aims effort before the cost spreads. That is what I want you to hear in this scenario. Strategic evasion is not about running away from the hard thing. It is about refusing to walk directly into the hard thing when the trap is already visible. There's a second misread here that leaders need to watch. Some leaders hear evasion and think the move is to avoid the entire issue. That is wrong. The route changes. The objective does not. The manager is not trying to avoid the customer. The manager is trying to protect the customer promise. The manager is not trying to avoid BOPIS. The manager is trying to make BOPIS credible. The manager is not trying to avoid inventory problems. The manager is trying to keep inventory uncertainty from becoming a customer-facing failure. That distinction matters because weak evasion avoids ownership. Strategic evasion protects ownership by changing the route before the problem becomes more expensive. In this pickup scenario, the leader is not saying, cancel anything risky. That would be too blunt. The leader is not saying, never trust the system. That would be too cynical. The leader is not saying, every order needs a manager. That would be too slow. The leader is saying, this order has risk signals attached to it. Low count, promotion, returns, customer promise, pickup window. The normal route may not be enough. We need to adjust before the customer feels the failure. That is a mature read. It comes from understanding the difference between a task and a promise. Inside the store, BOPIS can become a task. Pick the item, stage the item, mark it ready, move the queue. But to the customer, it is a promise. The customer is building trust around whether the store can connect digital convenience to physical execution. That is the real test. That is why this matters for retail leaders right now. The store is not just a selling floor anymore. It is a fulfillment node, a return center, a service desk, a pickup point, a complaint surface, and a trust engine. All of that is happening at the same time. So when the digital side makes a promise, the physical store has to be able to support it. If the store cannot support it, the leader has to know that before the customer arrives. This is where a lot of managers get trapped. They think the failure begins when the associate cannot find the item. The stronger read is that the failure began when the promise kept moving without confirmation. They think the issue is the customer reaction. The stronger read is that the customer reaction is the cost of a promise the store allowed to stand. They think the issue is the system being wrong. The stronger read is that the system was one signal, and the leader needed to compare it against the floor, the promotion history, the return flow, and the time window. That better read gives the leader more control. It also gives the team more fairness. When the leader reads the trap earlier, the associate is less likely to become the scapegoat for a failure created upstream. Teams lose trust when they are blamed for failures they inherited too late. If the associate receives a risky order late with a low count after a promotion, with a customer already on the way and no clear escalation route, that associate is not being set up for clean execution. They are being handed a trap. Think about how that plays out with the team. If the manager waits until the customer is standing there, the associate receives the pressure at the worst possible time. They are searching while the customer is waiting. They are explaining while the manager is being called. They are trying to protect the store's credibility after the promise has already weakened. That is a poor position to put a frontline associate in when the warning signs were visible earlier. A cleaner leadership move gives the associate a better operating position. It gives them clearer ownership, a cleaner escalation point, and a better time window. It also gives the manager a chance to shape the customer communication before the customer feels ignored or misled. That is not overmanagement. That is controlling the route before the route controls the team. Leaders have to see that. Not to remove accountability, but to aim accountability correctly. Accountability without a correct read becomes blame. Blame does not fix the route. Blame may make the leader feel like something was addressed, but if the route still lets unverified promises keep moving, the same issue will come back. Maybe not the same item, maybe not the same customer, maybe not the same associate, but the same pattern will return. Digital promise, physical uncertainty, late discovery, customer frustration, associate blame, manager recovery, trust damage. That is the pattern to break. And this is where the broader direct action system matters. Strategic evasion needs a clean read feeding it. If CSA is weak, the leader may not see the trap clearly. If deepen is weak, the leader may treat every problem the same way. If pro is weak, the leader may miss what the decision could damage. If ace is weak, the leader may accept the first answer that sounds right. If TMC is weak, ownership and communication drift. If pace and brain are weak, the team has no backup path when the first route starts to fail. If FLS is weak, the adjusted route may not turn into controlled action. If ALC is weak, the store never captures the lesson, and the same trap keeps returning. That does not mean the leader needs to run the whole system in the moment. It means the system exists so leaders stop treating each pressure point like an isolated surprise. The direct action system creates operating discipline across the read, the problem path, the risk check, the option comparison, the communication, the backup path, the execution, and the learning cycle. Strategic evasion is one move inside that system. It takes a forward read and turns it into route discipline before the trap activates. At the recognition level, start by watching for the orders where the promise is moving faster than the store's confidence. Low on-hand count, recent promotion, high demand item, recent returns, known shrink, backroom backlog, new associate assigned to pickup, ready notification approaching, customer arrival window closing. Those are not just details, those are signals. The signal does not prove the order will fail, but it tells the leader that the normal route may need attention. Ask yourself, what has the system already promised? Then ask, what has the store physically confirmed? Then ask, where is the gap? That gap is where the trap can form. Again, this is not the full tool application. The full strategic evasion work goes deeper than that. It deals with the forward read, the trap, the objective, the alternate route, ownership, communication, reassessment, and fallback strategy. For this briefing, the recognition is enough. Do not wait for the customer to become the proof. If the trap is visible before the customer arrives, the leader has a chance to protect the promise before it breaks. The customer should not have to walk in, stand at the counter, and reveal what the leader could already see forming. By then, the store is late, and late leadership always costs more. So bring this back to your own environment. Even if you're not in retail, the pattern still applies. Where is your operation making a promise before reality confirms it? Where does the system say yes before the team knows it can deliver? Where does the process keep moving because nothing has failed yet? Where are you trusting a signal that has not been checked against the physical work? Where is the customer, patient, resident, client, team, or stakeholder about to become the proof that the trap was visible too late? Strategic evasion starts there, not with fear, not with avoidance, with a clean forward read and enough discipline to say, we can see the trap forming. We are not abandoning the objective. We are changing the route before the trap owns the operation. That is how you protect the promise. That is how you protect the team. That is how you protect trust. And that is how you execute under pressure with more control. When you are ready to go deeper with this tool, go to www.direct-action-system.io/course-directory. Open the course directory, find the course tied to this tool, and start there. That is where the deeper application belongs. Thanks for listening to the briefing.